and welcome to our group project entitled, Is Time Real? We will be examining this question through 3 subsections of space and time, colonization and time, and the end of time. By the end of this presentation, we hope you understand more about the concept of time, and we have given you enough information to answer this question for yourself. Is time real?
Our first section dives into space and time. They include origins of time measurements, space and time telling methods, and the influence of astrology on the science of astronomy along the Silk Roads. There are many connections between space and time, like the fact that light takes time to travel from one place to another. We see objects not as they are now, but as they were at the time when they released the light that has traveled across the universe to us. Astronomers can therefore look farther back through time by studying progressively more distant objects. Humans have always looked to the sky for answers. The origins of time measurements can be found in the Middle East and North Africa, driven by the needs to organize daily life more efficiently, organizing activities, events, shipments, and plant harvesting. One culture that thrived with space and time-telling methods is in Egypt. They used stars as the foundation of the Egyptian culture. The Egyptian calendar is based on the annual rising of the star Sirius, also known as Helios rising, which marked the start of agriculture and the mark of summer, which created the solar year. They believed in the start of the day of dawn and the 24-hour cycle. As well, they created something called a Merkhet. This measured the passage of stars by tracking the alignment of certain stars called decans in ancient Egyptian, one of the oldest tools in astronomy. By the 7th century BCE, in ancient Babylonia, central Mesopotamia, records of astronomical diaries came into existence. They weren't precise, however. Those observations were important in the long run. Observations like planets passing a reference star, like Pleiades, Venus re-emerging from the period of invisibility due to the closeness of the sun, and also Jupiter standing still and going in reverse direction, also known as retrograde motion. During ancient Babylonia, the measurement of the celestial objects had important social and cultural function. Warnings about wars to the king from the gods in heaven, impending barley harvest results, and epidemics. Babylonians then applied science to astronomical observations, like recording in cuneiform tablets and calculating the speed and position of Jupiter and other planets. During that time, the earliest recorded mathematics was also from Babylonian clay tablets, based on the sexagesimal system, which used the base 60 and utilized angles and fractions.
There was a great influence of astrology and the science of astronomy along the Silk Road during the Tang Dynasty period in China. Horoscope predictions were implemented in Chinese astrological framework, whose ideas were influenced from the Iranian plateau along the Silk Roads. The astrologer would predict these by the position of the sun at the time of a person's birth, or the calendar year. During this time, astrology was viewed as the base of multiple knowledge, especially from the Indo-Iranian sources, because of the close links to various types of sciences and mathematical observations. Indian astrology was also introduced in Central Asia, and early Islamic astrologers even included Indian theories in their work. One of the more important scholars who transmitted Indo-Iranian astrology is a well-known 9th century astrologer Abu Mashar from Balkh, who combined Hindu, Sasanian, and Heliocentric traditions in his highly influential work, Book of Thousands. Al-Biruni was the first scholar making the difference between astrology and astronomy, because he considered astrology to be more of an artistic practice and had weak mathematical and scientific foundation to it. Astrology later in history became more of a natural philosophy due to its eventual rejection as a science, but it helped influence the development of science along the Silk Road. Astronomy helps us understand our place in the universe, with theories like the round Earth model by Aristotle in 340 BCE. Aristotle discovered that the stars appeared lower in the sky as the day progressed, and that ships disappeared over the horizon. This created the idea at the time that people are at the center of the universe. Around the scientific revolution in the 1500s, continuous developments emerged, like Sir Isaac Newton's law of universal gravity, where masses attract masses, attraction is directly proportional to the product of their masses, and attraction is inversely proportional to the square of the distance between their centers. In 1929, Hubble's law was formed, making the discovery that distant galaxies are moving away from us and that the universe is constantly expanding.
Colonization, or theoretically colonialism, achieved its zenith during the period spanning from the 60s to the 20th centuries, when Western civilizations carried out widespread global expansion and domination. As a definition, such colonialism under Western dominance is the imposition of white rule over indigenous peoples who live in lands separated by seas from the hamstring of the empire and often accompanies imperialism. From the end of the 19th century to the beginning of the 20th century, the purpose of Western colonial rule was declared by those in power to be the civilized mission of educating barbaric peoples. At the time, Western colonization of alien civilizations had transformed from tangible political and territorial authority to a more intangible formation of control rooted in ideological aspects, which is the reason why the idea of Western centrism gradually formed in society of other cultural backgrounds. Western centrism, in brief, is a consciousness of Western superiority to all human civilization. For instance, the term international standard contains a Western-centric idea, which includes a genetic time measurement.
After World War II, the colonies of Western rapidly disintegrated. While nations once colonized have asserted their political independence, they can no longer escape the influences of Western ideology, thus giving rise to post-colonialism. Post-colonialism provides a critical review of the cultural amalgamation and control evoked by the period of Western colonization. It advocates that the contemporary society we live in can be identified as a post-colonial society, signifying that the prevailing social system and ideologies we acknowledge are legacies of colonization. Among them, the network encounters of British imperialist colonization established a world with interconnected spaces, stretching cultures leading to a global cultural spaces where subjectivities are mixed and the boundaries are no longer clear. As a working specific exemplification, the Commonwealth of Nations is a product of British imperialist colonial expansion. Eventually, Western culture evolved into common sense on a global scale, and we are now living in the aftermath of the cultural radiation caused by colonization, the post-colonial world. Most of the cognition in this world seems excessive uniformity, and absoluteness makes us criticize and reflect on it. The widespread impacts of colonization serves as a cause for us to begin examining the common idea that society today instills in us, and the ostensibly authoritative conceptualization and quantification of time is one of the Western ideologies that warrants scrutiny. In the current global context, the widely embraced concept of time, including its unit of measurement, should be questioned for its justifiability of existence by critique of the legacy of Western colonialism. From an alternative perspective, what is today called time in line with international standards was originally nothing more than a deceptive ideology developed by the colonial power to strengthen their control over the colonies and conceal the indigenous cultures. An article written by Giordano Nani called The Colonization of Time shows the effects of how Britain put their ideals of time onto the indigenous peoples of Australia and South Africa during the 19th century. In his writing, he goes over the continual exposure of Britain's system of using GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, to indigenous peoples of Australia and South Africa, which caused people to think that GMT was more important. Eventually, it led to the standardization of routines to be put in place, as well as the addition of British cognitive imperialism to their educational system. In his writing, the author notes how Britain's use of GMT comes from aspects of both legal, religious, and methodized developments, having very corporate associated ideals in both British society as well as Christian worship. This standardized use of time and its aspects in many parts of British society made it so that British people and individuals living in British society were made to unquestionably follow these systems. Also in the writing, the author provides an example of a Lovedale missionary school in Cape Colony, showing how Britain's concepts of time had been interjected into the school system. Britain had thought that their addition of time and their corporate ideals to indigenous school systems would be beneficial to them, In this sense, Britain provided a Western-centric ideal, thinking that they were helping a culture that wasn't as proficient as theirs. Eventually, this addition to the curriculum changed the mindset of both Indigenous students and staff to adapt into this way of thinking.
What is time? As we decipher what time is, the questions emerge centered around whether time ever began. Is it finite or infinite? Can we travel into the future or the past? Will time ever end? To unravel these questions, one must go back to define time. The first thing that comes to my mind is subjective. Time is subjective to our experiences of it, our past, present, and what we think of the future. The concept of time is multifaceted and there is no single irrefutable answer. To the common man, time is an intangible yet fundamental concept that defines the events in his life. Time serves as a definition of events in a chronological manner through which we can measure and quantify duration. But as we delve deeper into the multifaceted way of time, we look at theories that aim to explain what time is concerning other subjects. Presentism suggests that only the present exists, where we live in one dimension, and the past and the future do not exist, with only the recent events having ontological existence. Externalism, on the other hand, explains the idea of a four-dimensional reality where the past, future, and present are all equally real. To combine both, we see the growing block theory where the past and present are fixed and real, whereas the future isn't in existence yet. As time passes, events are added to the ever-growing block of the present and past, almost as if we will never approach the future as the future, instead the current present as we move forward in time. The absolute and relational ideas of time are the two significant methods by which scientists view the concept of time. We differentiate the two through the simple idea of whether time exists independent of material. The simple question is that in a hypothetical scenario, if a big crunch, which is a reverse Big Bang, were to occur and material around us cease to exist, would time still pass by? Through all our lectures, I've been shown numerous methods through which people define time and its relativity to other subjects, such as light, space, and material. Time is a concept independent of all topics, something intangible that passes on. Or at least that's what I think. We will never be free of time due to its infinite nature. Even if all material were to cease to exist across all boundaries, there will still remain an expanse, space. Through that, time will move forward. Our methods of relating time to light, space, and material may shift or even cease to exist, but time in itself will not. Time is independent of material and object and continues to be measured through the lack of physical entities, like the concept of timelessness. This extract from Time, a book by Katinka Ridderbos, further makes me question if time could ever cease regardless of matter or relation to the subject. Temporality is part of the very essence of our existence. We may think of time as being linear or cyclic or something altogether different. We may contemplate the possibilities of time travel afforded by these different concepts of time, and we may speed up or slow down our internal clocks. But what we cannot do is break free from time. We can live outside time no more than outside the dimensions of our space.
Many theories exist about the end of time. If time does exist, then how will it come to an end? Black holes are an interesting theory. When a black hole forms, the density of matter increases, which increases the force of gravity, which increases density, continuing the cycle until both density and gravity become infinite. Time ends inside of a black hole, while simultaneously continuing elsewhere. A person's timeline is infinite. After they die, their energy is carried on through other beings. A black hole ends a person's timeline. Therefore, a person's timeline ends when they are sucked into a black hole. There are numerous theories on the end of time. The Big Crunch is a theory where expansion of the universe stops and the reverse of the Big Bang happens. The universe starts to shrink until it consumes itself. This theory is now being believed to be unlikely due to matter being so sparse and unseen energy is accelerating the expansion. If this were to happen, time will come to an end along with the universe. Next, the Big Whimper is the theory where the universe expands forever.
This is considered the most likely fate. We would enter a state of equilibrium where every process is undone, no clear progression forward. Time never ends with this theory, but it becomes pointless. Another theory is the Big Rip, which would be a result of phantom energy, also known as dark energy, not being constant. The universe would then expand to an infinite amount even if the atoms are shredded. If this theory is correct, it is theorized that the universe would end in approximately 20 billion years and time would stop. The next theory is the Big Freeze, where the universe fills with phantom energy and reaches infinite density. The matter freezes and is locked in place. Time will seize up. This theory would occur if the universe is in a membrane moving in a higher dimensional space. The last theory of the end of the universe is the Big Lurch. This does not require dark energy, it requires ordinary matter to become a frenzy. A pressure forces becomes infinite. Density and cosmic expansion remain at safe levels, and time may or may not carry on. This can be as soon as 9 million years from now.
We have reached the end of our presentation, so thank you for listening and watching. I hope you have learned more about the concept of time through colonization in time, space and time, and the end of time. As there is still no definite answer, we hope we have given you enough information to answer the question for yourself. Is time real?